we're saying no, actually. We think that people are not algorithms. We think that if we actually get into conversation with people, interesting things happen.
We all wanna be good, good, good. Good neighbour.
Okay, but now it's time to welcome our first ever guest. We have Anthea Lawson. She's an author, a campaigner, and a community organiser.
Anthea's written books, campaigned, and she's even attempted to plant a garden in the middle of Parliament Square. But she's here today to talk to us about the work she's doing in South Devon. It's called Common Ground. She's invented a thing called a democracy meter. And to find out what it is, please welcome Anthea Lawson. Welcome, Anthea.
Hi, Anthea.
Hi there. Thanks for having me. This is totally brilliant, and I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, right. I've got some questions. Tell us, first of all, why have you written so much about community organisers and the lives of activists?
Yeah, I'm writing about activism like really broadly, not just community stuff. I suppose I describe myself in one way as a recovering NGO campaigner. So I've done lots of different kinds. Like everyone else here, I want a world that's like based on caring for life and not revolving around money. And I'm interested in the deep stories that help make the dominant culture what it is. I'm interested in how they're transmitted across generations. I'm interested in how we might interrupt them, actually. And activism, it's something I've done for a long time, but also I think it's an interesting place to start interrupting some of those patterns with people who might be willing to do so. And the reason I got into writing about this is I noticed that there were ways sometimes in which our actions are not always congruent with the world that we want to create. So I was working for human rights organisations and I'd see human rights defenders treating each other terribly. Or in another realm, in climate activism, you see us trying to kind of stop industrial growth economics from burning out the planet, and we burn ourselves out. The patterns in the system we want to fight repeat in us, and that's what my book, The Entangled Activist, was about. So in my writing, what I'm trying to do is offer ways for us to think about the psychology and the spiritual aspects and the philosophical aspects, all of the kind of cultural stuff that underpins what we're doing, some of which is unconscious. And we can't really see what's going on until we actually kind of like start to look at it.
Can you tell us about your organisation, Common Ground, and this democracy meter that you've created?
Yes. Now, look, first thing I should say is it wasn't my idea. Amazingly, there's another woman called Anthea Simmons who came up with this along with the founders of the South Devon Primary, which was an attempt to get serious about sort of strategic voting, by which we managed to get a progressive alliance and get everyone behind, choose who to get behind, to get rid of the Tory MP. There'd been a Tory incumbent for 100 years, and we got rid of them at the last election. So it's a kind of street level technology for starting conversations, and it's really fantastic kind of analog lo-fi technology. You need a flip chart and some flip chart paper, and you need some markers, and you need a load of stickers, and everyone likes stickers. And we basically put some questions up. You can go to the website or the Insta if you can't see questions on there. And they're often questions that don't have a kind of clear-cut answer. It might be, would you want to live in Trump's America? Do you think there's more that unites than divides us? Do you think young people have got it harder than their grandparents' generations? And really, the purpose of this is to get into conversations. It's to get into political conversations on the street. And the reason we're doing that is, well, look, the billionaires who own the right-wing media and the social media channels have tried to hijack the conversation. And we're saying no, actually. We think that people are not algorithms. We think that if we actually get into conversation with people, interesting things happen. And what happens is there's huge appetite for these kind of conversations. I tend to stop people, we've all got, those of us that are doing this, we've all got different ways of getting people into the conversations. We're just setting up in shopping streets on a Saturday morning, sometimes on a weekday. And we say, well, my way of doing it is I go, oh, do you want to come and have a chat, have a quick chat with us? And they're like, what's it about? Who are you from? And I say, well, we're not from a political party. Actually, tell you what, we're a group of a bunch of grumpy middle-aged women, and we think that the state of political conversation on the news and on social media is absolutely terrible, and we think we can do better here on the street. Do you want to come and have a go? And they're usually a bit intrigued and go, yeah, all right then, come on, let's have a chat. And it starts from there. It's a form of deep canvassing, really.
Do you think that the model you're talking about is something that could be easily adopted by other people in different communities as well?
Yeah, we think it might be. You know, it might not look exactly like this. You know, we're not here saying everybody should do it this way. That's the last thing we should do. You know, we're a bunch of friends who know each other and you know, associated people, you know, who found each other. You know, different people sign up and join us each time we do it. A lot of people are like, say, you know, they're glad to see us doing it and can they join in? And we say, yes, great. Come and get involved. Come and join us next week. But there might be other ways of doing this. In fact, I'm very keen to find out if there are other people doing equivalent things or things like it. I want to be in conversation with them. I can't believe we're the only people doing stuff like this, which is why we've just made a website and just got ourselves set up on Instagram just this week. We've been doing it for quite a few months now. There may be other ways to do it, but the thing that does feel really clear is that talking is the way forward. You know, I said I used to do sort of NGO campaigning. That was a kind of elite level access where we'd go and lobby politicians and produce like carefully evidenced research reports. Of course, all that is important, especially in a time when truth seems to be going by the wayside for those who would like it to do so they can't be scrutinised. Like, of course, that's important. But that kind of approach on its own is being overtaken by what's going on. And the whole sort of setup, the whole environment of democracy in which we can even do those kind of approaches are not going to work. They're not going to be available anymore if we end up with the kind of governments that are threatening. So unless we do get out and talk in our communities, I think that's the baseline of where it starts. And that might look very different to what we're doing, but there might be things in common too.
I'm sure there will be things in common, because I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It is just about people that feel disempowered, feeling empowered just to have a chat. Someone I think you'll agree with and who I think you'll also like is a poet, Holly McNish, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on her.
She's an absolute hero, so yeah, I'd love to do that.
If you really want your country back, go ahead and take it. It's not difficult. There are posters up on every street about what your town needs help with. Local litter picking groups are always on the lookout. The library needs volunteers. The youth club needs a paint job. The community centre's desperate for folk to go on weekdays to play board games with older residents or help out in the cafe. The Rape Crisis Centre needs fundraisers and donors, and drivers are in dire need to get non-drivers to doctors. The library needed volunteers all summer. Did you go there? The local football clubs need coaches and Lions folk and supporters. And if you do not want to help with anything above, just admit you do not give a shit and shut the fuck up.
There's something about that, Anthea, that's kind of chimes with a comment that I know you relayed back to us at the convention that we met each other at in September. You met somebody who said, I hope not everyone's like me. Can you just say something about, you know, because you meet, when you go out and do these kinds of conversations, you meet all sorts of people, don't you? You do, I mean, I've done it. You hear extraordinary things.
Yeah, it's really, it's extraordinary. And I just love doing it. Like, I mean, the thing I love most is being in communication with people and hearing their stories. You know, that's why I trained as a journalist 30 years ago. I love that. And also it's full on sometimes, because when you ask these kind of questions, you know, we usually have a question about immigration, you know, so that there's an opportunity for us to start pushing back on some of the messaging that people are just like having like sprayed at them in a fire hose all the time. And so you encounter people's racism. And so I have to sort of steady myself and just sort of stay in the conversation a bit. It's like, right, well, if this is what I want to do, let me have a go. And I just keep asking why. I sounded a bit aggressive as I said that to you, because I'm sort of describing it from outside. But when I'm in it, I try and sort of drop myself a bit and I just say, oh, really? Why is that? And I just keep saying why. And after you say why a few times, and it invites people to express why they feel what they do, it starts sort of, their argument starts fragmenting a bit. And I think what is happening, it took me a while to realise it. And that particular comment where this lady said at the end of the conversation, oh, I hope everybody, it was an elderly lady, she was about 85. And she told me, you know, we talked for about 15 minutes and she told me quite a bit about her life. She also had some really entrenched views, which I couldn't begin to make headway with. The most I could do in that situation was to try and show, as we always do, the ways in which those views might be being weaponized by people who are not going to act in her economic interests, because sometimes you can make some headway with that kind of approach. But I think what happened when I was like thinking about it over the following few days, that comment kept staying with me. I think she heard herself. I think we're all made up of multiple parts, and I think some human bit at the heart of her heard herself speak, and she maybe became a bit conscious of it. That's all I can guess. I don't know. I can't make windows into people's souls, but that was my guess. And it felt like something slightly profound just happened in that interaction between us, in which we got on, and she felt heard, and I was allowing myself to, be slightly moved by what she was saying, in the sense that I was allowing it to register on me, rather than just going, God, this woman's an out-and-out racist, I can't talk to her. Which, in other circumstances, I might just have gone, I don't want to deal with that. There's a lot sort of to unpack in these interactions, but it was something like that.
Well, I think often people probably are saying all these things to themselves and they're not having these actual chats. So that's just sort of whirling around their heads and it's sort of very negative. And then the minute they actually say it out loud to another person, maybe it took her by surprise. So that was really important.
Yeah, maybe. I think also people are being bombarded with such, the repetition, the far right and reform and all of every sort of shade of far rightness. They're all doing the same thing, which is just repeating. And we know from sort of framing theory, George Lakoff's work, that works. And so what I see in these conversations is the extent to which a lot of people don't really know, like, this is what I stand for, these are my views. They've got their personal concerns about their material situation, which everyone's got to some varying degree at the moment, some very seriously. And they've got their feelings about that, and then that gets kind of caught up in this bombardment. So when people are offered a bit of space to have a think about it, maybe something else emerges. Maybe, not always. Like some people, you can't go there at all.
And finally, we're going to ask all of our guests this. We were wondering, what do you think it takes to be a good neighbour?
A good neighbour. Oh, there's so many versions of this, aren't there? I thought Holly McNeish, she's such a hero. She said a load of them. It's the people getting involved at the food bank and the Pay What You Can community cafe, and it's the people trying to keep the shit out the river, and it's the woman I know who walks around everywhere with a huge Palestinian flag to remind everyone that there's a genocide going on in Gaza. It's all of these things, but I think what they've it's the woman I know who knows everyone on the street and checks in on the old folk and knows exactly how to get the street shut for a really banging street party. But really what all these things have got in common is that they're about being in communication, and they're not sort of either being in this polarity of like, oh, I've got to save the world myself and I don't know how to do that, so I shan't even start, or sitting at home and not doing anything. They're actually just getting out there, because all of those things start with a conversation.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much, Anthea. Thanks for joining us. Can we get hold of one of your books, just quickly?
Oh, yeah, they can be ordered from all the usual places, but let's not give any money to Jeff Bezos. It's called The Entangled Activist, and the new one's called How Not to Save the World, and it'll be out next June.
Thank you so much, Anthea Lawson.